What happens when a world power demands $2.8 trillion from a smaller neighbor? It's supposed to be a bold move, right? But what if I told you that Donald Trump's recent demand from Canada wasn't strength? It was a colossal misstep. In just 3 words, Mark Carney dismantled that entire claim, and it wasn't just clever. It went viral because it revealed something far deeper about America's place in the world today. Stick around, because the real story here is about a global power losing its grip, and you won't believe how it all unfolded. So what exactly happened here? Donald Trump, speaking at a private fundraiser, demanded $2.8 trillion from Canada. He claimed that decades of unfair trade deals and resource imbalances had cost the U.S. that amount. On the surface, this sounds like a straightforward trade dispute. But here's the thing. It's not just about money. This is a bigger issue, one that signals a massive shift in how global power is wielded today. What if this isn't just an isolated blunder? What if it's a sign of a collapsing American influence on the world stage? Stick with me as we dive deeper into what this actually means for the future of U.S. diplomacy. Here's the problem. Trump's $2.8 trillion figure was pulled out of thin air. No documentation, no methodology, just a bold claim. And when Canadian officials asked for proof, the response from Washington wasn't data. It was evasion. The Treasury Department said they were reviewing the numbers. The Commerce Department pointed to classified methodologies. And the U.S. Trade Representative, they called it proprietary. In other words, there was no evidence, just political theater. Now, notice what's missing here, the actual work. When you're making a demand that big, it's not just about words, it's about numbers. And Trump's numbers had nothing to back them up. This is where things start to go from embarrassing to dangerous. As soon as Carney was asked about Trump's demand, he didn't engage in long-winded rhetoric or heated defense. Instead, he dropped 3 words that instantly flipped the script: show your work. It wasn't just a challenge. It was a wake-up call. Because when it comes to international diplomacy, a demand that big needs more than just bravado. It needs substance. And that's exactly where American economic diplomacy has started to fail. This isn't just a single instance. It's part of a pattern. American leaders have become more reliant on assertions than facts, pressure than persuasion. Think about it. How did we get to a point where America's most trusted allies, partners like Canada, are questioning our competence? This isn't just a misstep. It's a sign of a system breaking down. Now, things get even worse. The response to Carney's challenge wasn't just more empty words, it was more avoidance. When Canada released its own comprehensive analysis of the trade relationship, it didn't just expose the lack of evidence behind Trump's $2.8 trillion claim, it showed how little understanding American leadership had about the economic ties between the two countries. Here's the kicker. That analysis proved America benefits massively from Canada's resources, more than Trump ever acknowledged. American consumers save billions annually because of Canadian energy exports. American manufacturers rely on Canadian raw materials that would cost far more elsewhere. And let's not forget about the $400 billion in Canadian assets held by U.S. financial institutions. This isn't a one-sided relationship. It's mutual. And Trump's framing of it as a victimization was not only wrong, it was dangerously misleading. Now watch how quickly this escalates. In the days following the exchange, something unprecedented happened. Allies, partners, and even neutral countries began questioning not just American claims, but American competence. Editorial boards in London, Frankfurt, and Tokyo ran stories analyzing the fallout. European officials privately called American trade policies post-empirical, meaning based on rhetoric, not reality. Even Mexico, one of the most vulnerable nations to American pressure, started asking for third-party arbitration on trade disputes. This is the kind of global ripple effect that signals a complete breakdown. And it didn't stop there. Canadian pension funds started quietly pulling back from U.S. assets. European manufacturers are sourcing critical components from elsewhere. Asian investors, they're shifting capital into projects that don't rely on American approval. This isn't just a trade issue anymore. It's a global trust issue. And the question is, what happens if this continues? But let's step back for a moment and think about this from your perspective, because this isn't just about political figures and trade wars. It's about how this impacts you. When countries start losing trust in American economic stability, it doesn't just affect Wall Street. It affects jobs, prices, and the cost of living for everyday Americans. Those quiet shifts in global markets mean higher risk premiums on American debt, more volatility in currency exchanges, and and less predictability in the products you buy. You don't see these changes in headlines, but they ripple out bit by bit. And over time, it's not just about what happens to the U.S., it's about what happens to all of us who depend on a stable, reliable global system. If this feels familiar, if you've started noticing things feeling off, drop a comment below and let me know. But here's the deeper issue we're missing in all the noise. This isn't just about one bad demand or one failed diplomatic moment. It's about how the system itself is starting to break down. American economic diplomacy used to be grounded in one thing: credible, reliable analysis. But now it's built on pressure tactics and empty rhetoric. Why? Because institutions that used to back up American power, like the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and the Commerce Department, have been hollowed out. What you're seeing now isn't just about individual missteps. It's the result of decades of deprioritizing expertise in favor of political expedience. The unfortunate reality is that this isn't just a Trump problem. It's a systemic issue that goes far beyond one administration. And the longer it goes unchecked, the harder it will be to rebuild the very credibility that made America a global leader in the first place. So where do we go from here? There are two paths we could take. On one hand, America could double down on its current approach, continuing to assert power without evidence, relying on threats rather than facts. If this happens, we could see even more erosion of trust on the global stage. Countries will hedge against U.S. volatility, moving away from the dollar, seeking alternatives in trade and investment. On the other hand, there's a chance for a reckoning, a moment where the U.S. recognizes the gap in its own system and takes a hard look at what it takes to rebuild its credibility. But this would require a deep, long-term investment in institutional competence, a return to the kind of careful, evidence-driven diplomacy that made America a world leader in the first place. The truth is, no one knows which path America will choose, but the momentum is already building, and the next move could decide the future of global influence. Here's the deep takeaway from everything we've covered. America's true power was never just in its size or military might. It was in the credibility of its institutions, the ability to back up its claims with evidence, to negotiate with trust and authority. And right now, that credibility is under fire. Trump's $2.8 trillion demand wasn't just a political misstep. It was a symptom of a much larger issue: America's failure to do the work required to lead. The ripple effect from this moment won't just impact trade. It will affect global markets, diplomacy, and the future of American influence itself. So as we watch this unfold, remember, the next steps will reveal whether America can rebuild its institutional capacity or if it's already too late. If you want to keep tracking this story and understand what comes next, make sure to follow for continued analysis, because the story isn't over yet.